And we're live.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so hi everybody. Can you hear me properly and see? I think that maybe we can use chat for this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should be good.
Uh-huh. Okay. So today we are going to discuss an incredibly interesting topic. I think that it will be useful for teachers and for people who work with the different cultures because the topic is like how to deal with the different cultures working in tech. And we have today an amazing speaker who has an incredible experience in this topic. And I'll just work as a support and I'll present the part from the teaching side, like how to help your students to deal with different cultures working in tech. My name is Alina, and I really hope that you can hear me. Okay. Can you please? Aha. Yeah, here we are. Okay. Yeah. So our speaker today is Karuna. Yeah, is it true like this?
Yep.
Can you please
Yes.
introduce yourself, maybe just to give short understanding?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe
Sure.
more if you want.
All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening in the first of a series of webinars to celebrate English for IT's 10th anniversary. So, 10 years of English for IT. Congratulations to Anna Gandrabura, our founder, as well as my colleagues at English for IT, and all of you guys who are joining us this evening or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's great to see all of you guys joining in. My name is Karuna Krishnasamy, and I'm a senior DevOps engineer for a software consultancy called Hivekind. And we're headquartered in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but we have teams and clients spread out all across the globe. So my team is based in Asia Pacific, but we also have guys in Georgia, in uh, forgot the name, Argentina. We have a team in Nigeria, clients in the US, and the DevOps support team in Canada and the Philippines. So we're very geographically distributed, and we're a very diverse team, which is a pretty good point for me to speak about diversity in tech and share with you guys some of my thoughts around how to handle communication across cultures, and what what things to keep in mind to make sure that communication between your various teams goes smoothly. So thank you all for joining. I see we have a comment here saying Argentina in the house. So cool. There
Yeah,
we go.
cool. Okay, so I guess that today we are going to listen to priceless experience because it's not like just a teachers conference where teachers share their theoretical ideas, yeah, how to help their students, but we have a great practical experience, and that is the best I think about today's meeting. So you mentioned a lot of cultures and you mentioned plenty of people from different parts of the world. And uh, it's the most interesting question to start. What peculiarities have you noticed about those cultures? What maybe some points that you want to highlight, some differences?
So I try not to generalize, and I don't really want to give a very general statement, because while I believe that people share commonalities within their cultures, um, I also think that there are a lot of people who you know don't fit into that mold, and there are situations in which you can't really generalize across a whole culture. So I don't want to be I don't want to generalize too much, but I also want to say that the concept of high context cultures high context communication and low context cultures, low context communication, um, really, in my experience, is a thing, and does exist and can be very apparent. And for those of you who have not heard about high context cultures and low context cultures, um, they refer to how a particular culture communicates. And in a high context culture, implicit communication is very implicit. Things aren't things maybe aren't explicitly stated, and instead, we rely more in high context cultures on tone of voice or shared cultural understanding. And it's a common feature of high context cultures that social hierarchy plays a role in how you discuss certain things, right? And there is a larger power distance between like a manager and their subordinates, right? And therefore communication is kind of different. And examples of high context cultures could be, like Asian culture tends to be very high context. There's a lot of subtleties around communication in very Asian companies where things aren't directly stated. Rather, there's a lot of implicit tonal information in how you present things or how you ask questions. And hierarchies are also, more solidly defined. In low context cultures, things are more explicitly stated, right? There's a lot of emphasis on making things as clear as possible when in the communication itself. So not as much reliance on tone of voice, not as much reliance on having this shared cultural understanding of what it is that's being talked about. And cultures that have been kind of identified as being low context would be American, Western European, where directness and uh, being very explicit and clear in what it is you're saying is valued, right?
Yeah.
And based on my experience, those two things, those two elements of communication are really quite apparent.
Yeah.
So I said I wasn't going to generalize, but I kind of did. But forgive me for that.
Yeah, I think that there is the cool point, and I really wanted to highlight it too, that avoiding stereotypes, it's like the core skill and core theme, yeah, working in multicultural team. And it's not like you're by dividing all cultures into two big groups. I think that it's not the same like to stereotype, because there is a line between being aware of cultural differences and stereotyping, yeah, and painting groups of people with a broad brush, such as thinking that maybe all people from a certain region behave a certain way, yeah. So it's different things, and I really believe that it's a good idea to be aware of certain business norms, yeah, like being open open-minded about your team members and how they prefer to work and communicate. Yeah, it will help all team to manage better and to avoid some misconceptions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we can go to the next part. I think it's like what norms we should follow. Yeah, and what things. Can we please go to the next slide? Okay, I guess we will in a moment. Yeah, all right. So while the slide don't work, I think that I can ask you, like, mm, what are the main aspects the person has to pay attention to when working on a multicultural team? One of these we've already mentioned, yeah, like avoiding stereotypes and being aware of cultural differences, but maybe you can just bring some more.
So I think one of the main things that you should be aware of when working with a multicultural team is being very sure that the person that you are talking to understands understands you not just from a linguistic perspective, but also understands what is being asked of them. And this is very vitally important when you're in a work context, because um, I asking someone, "Do you understand?" is often not the best way of gauging whether it is they truly understood what it
Yeah.
is you are explaining, right? Because, like I mentioned, with certain cultures, if you are a team lead, or if you are a client or someone in a position of responsibility, talking to someone who either reports to you or is in some way like a subordinate, or someone that perceives themselves as working for you, or lower on the hierarchy, uh, it may be difficult for them to say that they don't understand something. So they'll just say yes, yeah, I understood, everything's fine, and then they go off into the wilderness, and the work that's delivered is not what you asked for. So I think a very important thing is to ask people to restate, okay, how do you understand this problem? Can you restate the problem to me so that I know we're on the same page? Or can you restate, what it is we're trying to achieve here, so that I know we're on the same page, right? And from their response, you're able to understand whether or not they truly understood you, instead of saying, do you understand? And then there's them saying, yeah, all good, and then realizing later that that's not the case. Um, Another thing is, you should always assume good faith, right? Because some cultures are more direct in their means of communication, some cultures are less direct, but you should just assume that the other person is communicating or operating in good faith, unless proven otherwise, right? So kind of reduce your barrier of feeling offended in a way, right? Because sometimes people may be direct, but it's just culturally how they're used to communicating. So don't take that too hard. Um, and another thing is to understand that you know people who grew up in a completely different environment from yourself, they may have somewhat rather unique perspectives on the work that we're doing, or just different thoughts about what may be an appropriate way forward, and they may not be as willing to share, right? And I think a lot of value can be extracted from leveraging, someone's cultural knowledge and the circumstances that they grew up in. And sometimes you do get some really fresh, interesting ideas from discussing that. So try to get to know your coworkers, and understand a little bit about where they come from, what
Yeah, so
they're.
it's all about people. Yeah, it's all about personality. Whether we speak about direct or indirect communicative types, yeah, it's still about people and their personality. Like every individual is different. Yeah, the point is like this. But like I can say that I really prefer this direct type of communication, and I'm always nervous to be too rude by asking some questions. So, for example, will it be rude, like to say happy birthday to your team member if he or she, if they are from like this indirect cultural space?
No, I think it's completely fine. And I think that if you're working in a situation where it's a multicultural team, I think everyone has to put in equal effort into understanding
Yeah.
each other. And if someone gets offended from being wished happy birthday, well, you know it's a give and take, right? you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, and also I think that there is an important point about different holidays because we have a big range of like cultural or religious holidays, and it's incredibly interesting how to manage all this in multicultural team because, for example, in Ukraine, it's like the holidays, the New Year holidays is like must be. Yeah, you can't avoid it. The 31st of December, it's like the day X that you can't be working on. But I guess that in other cultures, in other religions, there can be totally another dates for the same occasion, and how should all this be managed in such multicultural team?
That's a fantastic question, actually. So I'll tell you how we approach it.
Yeah.
We meaning Hivekind, my employer. So we're headquartered in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and so there are some federally mandated holidays that we need to give out, right? Just by nature of the fact that our headquarters is in Kuala Lumpur, and those are related to Malaysia. We have Malaysia's National Day off, the birthday of the king, birthday of
Mhm.
certain sultans. Okay, but we also give floating holidays to our team to use how they wish for their particular religious holidays or holidays that uh, matter to them. And those aren't part of their annual leave. So they have annual leave as well. That is just for taking time off to go on vacation. And there are also floating holidays that we give to use for various different religious or social holidays that people may want to take. And we also have to take into account the fact that our clients are in the US, and they follow American federal holidays and also certain state ones. And we just need to make sure that we're aware of those holidays, of the times when our clients or our client teams might not be available, and plan around that. So that was a fantastic question, by the way.
Yeah, so do you have a calendar of different holidays of your team members to congratulate everybody on time?
Yeah, we have a shared
Okay.
leave calendar for everyone, and I have my calendar is quite a mess, to be honest. I've got too many events on it. Yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah. So thank you really for answering this because it was like even my personal question that was really interesting to know. And I think that we can sum up and to maybe highlight three main challenges when working in a multicultural environment. What is it for you?
So I mentioned before, truly understanding or truly knowing whether or not someone understands you. I think that is an absolutely key challenge
Mhm.
that a lot of people will run up against, and a lot of people will get burned by.
And it's both
And
like, sorry.
no, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would just wanted to mention that it's both like language problem, yeah, for someone who is not non-native speaker, and cultural problem, yeah. So here we just have a mixture of two problems.
Exactly, and that's exactly true because um, it, it could be a cultural thing where like the boss is asking you a question. Do you understand? Yep, I
Yeah,
understand. Right? And it could also be linguistic where
yeah,
I've stated something in a way where they think they understood it from a linguistic perspective, but maybe they didn't. Which is why it's very important to be able to get people to restate the problem, or to describe how they see what it is we're working on, in order to deal with assumptions and deal with things, misunderstandings at the initial stages, rather than after a sprint has gone by,
yeah.
because that can really cause a lot of dysfunction in the team if uh, you know people aren't being people are just talking past each other. That is a primary cause of dysfunction, I feel.
Yeah.
especially if your team is geographically distributed, where, because of the nature of time zones, right? If you're not very explicit, and if if there isn't positive handoff and understanding, you've basically lost a day of work, right? Because the person you're handing it off to didn't understand something, goes off and implements something completely different, and the next day, you just lost a day. So um, that's one main challenge. The and I think that is really the key challenge, just knowing that understanding has been reached. Another thing I would say is uh, making sure that valid thoughts are being expressed, and people feel comfortable to share their opinions and their thoughts on the project, because a lot of times people may have uh, very valid concerns, very valid thoughts, but might be afraid of expressing them because they feel like, their language skills aren't up to task to be able to properly express themselves, or they feel like, they can't contradict, a team lead or a boss. And I think that boils down to building trust with your team, and to making sure you are supportive of your team, and they know that they can raise questions, raise objections, raise worries, uh, in a safe environment where they won't be judged, and the problem will be discussed and dealt with. So I think building trust also helps alleviate some of that, culturally driven reluctance to speak openly about certain problems.
Yeah.
So
I also want to mention one, like to sum up all of this. Maybe this will deal more with managers or directors or like some heads of departments, but I really believe that it must be challenging to make a team, to build a team, to work together as a team of one, like to understand each other, support each other, trust each other, as you mentioned, and to remember that wherever you are from, yeah, and whatever culture you are from, you work for the same goal, yeah, and you work for the same success for your organization and customers, yeah, in the end. So it's all like this. And I think that there is even a metaphor in my head that working in a multicultural team, it's like love, because you love not because of something, but despite of. And working in a multicultural team is the same. You work for success, you work to achieve the same goals, not because of some reasons, but despite of all these differences, you have the same goal and the same line in the end. Okay, so
and that was a good point, because I think I've been very heavily talking about my perspective as someone who tends to run these teams, but uh, as someone who has non-native speakers, or who has team members who may sometimes feel afraid to share their opinions. I think what you can do, if English is not your first language, or if you're um, working in a team where you feel a little bit apprehensive about sharing your opinion, my advice would be, it's much better to share your opinion, share your thoughts, and ask questions and share your concerns, rather than to go off with the wrong understanding of the problem, and waste your time eh, going off on a tangent, working on something uh, completely you know unrelated to maybe what it is that was being asked. So uh, don't don't worry so much about expressing yourself that you're paralyzed and unable to give that unable to ask that question, unable to give that opinion. Because trust me, the end result will be so much better if you just ask and are unafraid to, voice things out rather than keep them in. So
Yeah, by the way, like the core value of English for IT team, yeah, to ask all the questions that you have.
there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been speaking for 25 minutes about different challenges and difficulties working in multicultural team. But I really want you to share maybe with some advantages. We have no this question on slides, but I think that it will be cool to bring here also some positive things, because it's not only about challenges and difficulties. Yeah, there are plenty of cool things about working in multicultural team.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you get exposed to all kinds of different,
Yeah.
senses of humor, for sure. And
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see how some people think and uh, how people tick when it comes to certain subjects. And I also feel kind of blessed that I've been working with uh, some of my colleagues I've been working with for many years, and I know that if I go to Argentina, I have a place to stay. I know that if I go to Maine, I have a place to stay, and yeah, it's I definitely feel that working in a team with many different people has enriched me professionally as well as personally because um, it's always interesting seeing someone else's perspective on life and being introduced to ideas and thoughts that you know maybe you never even thought about before.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's cool.
It sounds like working in a multicultural team. It's like traveling without crossing your geographical borders. Yeah,
In
like
a
you
way,
just
yeah.
communicate with people, your team members, and you're traveling every day, visiting different cultures and countries. Yeah,
In
and
a way, yeah.
I really enjoy the point that you mentioned about your personal growing, yeah, that you know more about different cultures. And I think that um, while working in a multicultural team, you can really get a lot of soft skills like problem solving, maybe some creativity, yeah, being flexible, maybe thinking even quickly, yeah, to be able to solve all these problems. So I guess it's an incredible opportunity to work in the team like this. Okay, so I guess we can go to the really funny question about all this. Maybe you can recall some funny situations that occurred to you when working with team members from different cultures. I can bring a couple of them too that my students told me.
Hmm. So I mean, I looked at this list of questions, and this was the one that I had kind of the most trouble with because uh, I had a really hard time thinking about really funny situations involving working with different team members. But I do have this one from my previous job, um, and so at my previous job we had a bunch of contractors in Estonia, Russian speaking Estonians, and they came to Kuala Lumpur. It was their first time in Kuala Lumpur, and I hope this I hope we don't get banned on the screen in the stream for swearing, but in Malay, the word suka means to like, right? And of course, for our native Russian speakers or people who know Russian joining in on the stream, suka means something completely different. And these two guys from Estonia were like wondering why why are all these people uh, swearing, there was yeah, I think there were a group of teenage girls. They were talking about what flavor of ice cream they liked, and that was a pretty funny situation.
Yeah,
Um,
that's quite funny.
yeah. Uh, Besides that, no, I mean I do have a couple of colleagues who pronounce certain words in funny ways, but off the top of my head, I can't really recall. You
Yeah,
mentioned that you had a couple of examples, right, from your students?
yeah. I think that I really can hear. And this partly deals well with common mistakes that non-native speakers do. But first, I want to share with you one situation. Like I had a student, and she moved to Spain. She worked in PR, I guess. Yeah, it was like this, and it was before the pandemic, before the coronavirus, and there was like the maybe 15th day of working in this new company. And one day her colleague just was saying bye bye to her and kissed her in Czech. And my student was like, I was really shocked about this fact because usually I don't kiss even my mom at home, but she just kissed me, and it was really natural for this company to greet and to say goodbye this way. So I am not sure that it's like about all Spanish people and about all Spanish companies, but it can be like a cultural difference at this point. Yeah. And about mm, like mistakes that people do, and the one that you mentioned about suka, I think that we teachers name it like false friends. And these
Yeah,
false friends words, they really exist in different languages. My student told me this story, like he mentioned to his colleague that, oh, you have really great success in this project. I think that you have a fart. And fart, fart in Russian, it's like luck. But as we know in English, it's totally different. And the colleague was like, oh, what do you mean?
yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, and like go into the next question of our meeting about most common mistakes non-native speakers do when communicating with native English speakers. I think uh, the one of the most broad mistake that they do is like, I feel myself. I feel myself.
Right.
I feel myself bad. It's incredibly popular, and I think that almost every student does this mistake at least once in their life. Yeah, like I feel
Yeah.
myself. Yeah. So, how do you react when people say this way? Like, do you understand what they mean, or you feel like a little bit embarrassed?
Um, I mean, of course, I do find it amusing from time to time, especially I feel myself. It sounds really bad in English, but no, I generally don't have too much trouble understanding people because yeah, just from many years of experience dealing with people uh, across many many different countries, I I have kind of developed the ability to infer what it is they're trying to say, even if they're not, expressing themselves in the most grammatically correct or, accurate manner, depending on the context. Um, Common mistakes non-native speakers make. Uh, yeah, I feel myself. That's a pretty major one. I have a pet peeve with hearing clothes. So the clothes is a mistake that I hear all the time. Just um, and it's one of those mistakes that even even very proficient non-native English speakers tend to make. And
Yeah, it's
uh,
challenging to pronounce this word. I think that most of students find it challenging. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
um,
The
but I
double
think
negative. I think the double negative in sentences is a really common mistake. Like when people say, I don't know nothing. Yeah.
yeah, and in technical conversations that can sometimes get really complicated really quickly when you bring double negatives into a technical conversation.
Mhm.
I didn't not. delete. I didn't not drop the database table or something like that, right? That conversation can go sideways really quickly. Um, but honestly, I think the most dangerous mistake that non-native speakers make is just you know being quiet when they see something is wrong, right? Because they feel that they don't have the linguistic skills to express themselves, or they feel like there's some social distance between themselves and their manager or whoever. I think that that's a very fixable uh, behavior, but it's also a very damaging one. So if you want to improve your communication, and everyone who's listening in right now, if you want to improve, the lowest hanging fruit to improving your communication is to uh, really work on your fear of expressing yourself to your native speaker colleagues, or managers, whoever. Really try and break through that, and make sure that if you have a valid concern, or even if you think the concern isn't super valid but it is there, just express that. Because I can tell you, as someone who manages the team, I appreciate that so much more, that a concern is being expressed, that a problem is being raised. I appreciate that so much more, even if it's not expressed, in a super grammatically correct way. I truly appreciate that a lot more than silence, because it affects the work that we do, and our timelines. So that's the key piece of advice I feel I have for you guys.
Yeah, I really want this to. I really want to highlight this point because there are plenty of students that are afraid of expressing themselves, even when they have like intermediate, upper intermediate level of English. They still feel incredibly anxious about making mistakes, and we should point out here that we are really learning from mistakes. Yeah, from mistakes we do, and it's totally okay, and it's all right, and we shouldn't be embarrassed of mistakes because it's understandable for your team members that you're a non-native speaker. Yeah, and most of people, I think, they are like in some point of learning a new language, and they will totally understand you because partly all of us sometimes are non-native speakers in this or that language, and I guess there is nothing to be embarrassed of about mistakes.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of times I've noticed with students, they get very frustrated over very, very minor mistakes that um, I don't even, as a native speaker, wouldn't even like be very apparent to me.
Yeah,
And even native speakers make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, because sometimes I talk faster than I think, right? And this is common for native speakers of any language, right? Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone misspeaks, or sometimes messes up grammar. It's fine. And I think the most important thing is, why are you learning the language, right? To be able to express your thoughts in that language, to be able to accomplish something in that language.
yeah,
And if you're able to do that with some minor mistakes along the way, good job. That
yeah, yeah.
you're doing well.
There is a great TED Talk video about this idea. Like there is no big difference if you have like elementary level or intermediate. Sometimes you can have a lower level of English, but you will feel free to express yourself, to communicate. But sometimes you can explain the difficult grammar of past perfect continuous and all this stuff, but you will not be able to express yourself in a shop, yeah, or like when you speak to team members. So this communication skill is much more important, yeah, than just to be correct in language. But I guess that there is a really important point when the language and the mistakes we do, they can really mix with some cultural norms. One of them is like rhyme and intonation. It totally differs in the English and Russian or Ukrainian language. And I guess that rhyme and intonation differs in all languages. And sometimes the intonation we bring from our name, from our like mother tongue, can sound rude to native speakers of English. Is it like this? For example, it
Mm,
can sound too aggressive, or maybe like it can sound that you are sad and not happy to see someone you talk to.
it could. I'm trying to think of examples. I get what you mean, where like the emphasis, the intonation emphasis is placed on like the wrong part of the
Yeah, it
word,
can
and
sound maybe harsh.
mm, yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific example, but yes, I mean, if your intonation, okay, for example, if you place a lot of emphasis on you, it
Mm-hmm.
can sound very accusatory.
Yeah,
Um, and so I have a funny story about that.
cool.
Um, in uh, so I used to live in Odessa in Ukraine, and I had a landlord who was, he was the loveliest guy when he talked to me in Russian, and he was, he sounded like a regular guy, pretty polite. Uh, but he knew that I spoke English, right? And he would sometimes come and try and practice his English with me, and that's when he sounded like a mafia boss, right? He'd be like, Karuna, you have money for me today, right? And the intonation, the words he was using really sounded like he was threatening me for for my rent for the month.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so yeah, I mean, it can happen, but again, that's why context matters. And I knew from my previous interactions with him that he was a pretty nice, one of the best landlords I've ever had. Right, he was a pretty nice guy. Just when he tried to practice his English on me, he really did sound like he wanted to take a baseball bat and beat
Yeah.
uh, beat the rent out of me.
Also, I think that the problem can be with the questions, like the way non-native English speakers may begin questions, like "Why did you? Why didn't you?" Yeah, not like "I was wondering," and "Is there any reason of it?" Yeah, but in direct way, like "Why aren't you sent me the report?" And I guess it sounds kind of aggressive and harsh.
Yeah, that's actually very true.
Yeah, but
Um,
for native speakers of Ukrainian and Russian, it's not. It's like just a regular question, and you don't mean it to be aggressive. Maybe if someone means it to be aggressive, but I can suppose that most of people don't. And this, I guess, for non-native, for native English speakers, it sounds aggressive when you in direct way say like, "Why did you?" or "Why didn't you?" Yeah.
yeah, that's actually very true. Um, I wouldn't say that it sounds aggressive. I would say that it sounds very direct to the point of being accusatory.
Yeah, how
Which
would you
in
react to this if you just get a message from your colleague in this way, like, "Hey, Karuna, why didn't you call me yesterday?"
the problem is my boss is a pretty direct guy, even though he's from the US, but he's pretty direct. Um, mm, okay, when I first started working for this particular team lead of mine, yeah, I did find it sometimes when he asked very direct questions, it put me on the defensive, right? I felt like I had done something wrong. But after working with him for quite a while, I've understood that that's just his communication style, and he appreciates direct questions receiving direct answers. Um, so yeah, if you want to put someone at ease, try and frame the question as, is there any particular reason why you didn't do this? Or um, can you walk me through what led to this decision? Kind of soften up the question. Um, and yeah, if you ask, why didn't you do this? It does sound, it can put people on the defensive,
Mhm.
depending on the relationship that you have with them. So
Yeah.
amongst my, the team that I work with every day, yeah, they can say, why didn't you do this? And I'll feel completely fine because, we've been working together a very long time. We have a high level of trust. So
Yeah.
um, that's fine.
Yeah.
I
There is
can
a
be
cool.
very direct as well. I think
Mhm.
some of our colleagues at English for IT may feel I'm pretty
Yeah.
direct.
There is a cool comment in our chat that like, do you have my money? We can just maybe add this question to both, like, hey, it's the end of the month. Do you have my money?
That's exactly what he would say. He'd be like, Crouton, do you
Yeah.
have my money?
Yes, I
Pretty
do, but
funny.
I'm not going to give it to you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
nice
and
guy.
there is a cool comment from Olga that Russian-speaking people can mispronounce fact, and it will sound like a swear word as well. Yeah, like
They
they're.
pronounce it in a very Russian way. Fakt.
Yeah. That's true. Okay. So, okay, so I guess that we can discuss for short how to avoid these mistakes. But I think we should really paraphrase this question because there is no way to avoid those mistakes. There is a way, like, to maybe point out them, yeah, to make some mental notes and try to just work on your level of English. Yeah, but maybe you have any other methods of avoiding those mistakes and you could share it.
So I think understanding how to frame questions in a polite way and how to frame requests, questions, and feedback. If you figure out how to sort out those three, or how to express those three things in a polite way, in an appropriate way for a given audience, right? Team members, clients, and managers, you will have uh, you will have covered most common situations in which being overly direct uh, can look bad, right? Because those are the three kind of sensitive day-to-day things that you'd be doing, right?
Yeah,
Asking questions, um, putting in requests and giving feedback.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and when working in a multicultural team, you have an incredible opportunity to get feedback about your language. And if you feel that you're maybe not sure if this construction is okay, if it sounds politely, yeah, you can also ask your colleague, yeah, to give feedback. Like, can I ask this way? Is it appropriate to ask this way? Yeah, or maybe I should use another kind of language. Yeah, would you mind helping me about it? And as for teachers, I also want to mention that there is a difference between mistakes and errors, I guess. Because like mistake is an accident. Yeah, we should remember that it's just an accident or a lapse, and it's okay to do mistakes one more time is the core line here, that it's okay. And anyway, your team members will understand you. Yeah, I'm sure that I've already done plenty of mistakes while speaking because I felt pretty anxious and nervous today. But it's really not a distraction for Karuna to understand me.
Yeah,
Usually, I think teachers and students, they feel really like embarrassed about making mistakes. But I want to highlight this fact one more time, that it's not a distraction for communication. Yeah, it's not like the line which will split us for different parts of rooms of this webinar room, and Karuna will say, no, Alina, you're making too many mistakes. I'm not going to communicate with you further. Like, you're not on my level. We are not on the same page. Please go and work on your English. Then we'll return to the dialogue.
No, that would be a super dramatic stream.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the only way to avoid mistakes, it's like to be, I guess, ready to mm, to accept these mistakes. Yeah, not to feel embarrassed and not to feel that if you make mistakes, you're a bad person. Because for some people it's the equal thing. If I make mistakes, it means that I'm a bad person, a bad learner, a bad specialist, I'm a loser, and I should maybe close my laptop and go work just as a shopping assistant. It's like the most that I can do. Yeah, so be ready that making mistakes is not equal for your professional skills. Yeah, and it's not equal to your personality. And be ready to get this feedback from maybe native speakers, or to receive this feedback from your teacher. And as for teachers, we have here a really great opportunity to be someone who supports our students, not only as a teacher, but as a kind of psychologist who says that, okay, making mistakes, it's all right, because there are some sensitive students. And I really, as a teacher, I prefer to ask my students about their needs and preferences, to ask maybe at the beginning of the course which kind of mistakes correction they prefer. There are some students that really like being corrected immediately, and there are some students that prefer to focus on fluency and not to be corrected at all. Of course, as a teacher, I can't not correct at all, but I can make a list and then to bring this to our next lesson maybe, and to discuss it. Yeah. Okay. And also, I
Well, I
guess that,
just I just
yeah,
want to I just want to plug English for IT here a little bit. So we have a
yeah,
variety of Telegram channels, and I think, well, at least I'm pretty sure a significant portion of the people joining in today are aware of some of the English for IT Telegram channels. And I'm in most of them, and so are a lot of English for IT instructors. And if you ever need help understanding if a particular construction is, grammatically correct or polite, or if you have any concerns about whether or not you're expressing yourself in an appropriate manner, feel free to drop it in any of our Telegram channels. And English for IT, yeah, so that's been placed in the chat. Yeah, feel free to post your questions and concerns about what it is you're trying to express there, and one of us will help you out. So just a English for IT plug there.
yeah.
And
I agree
we
totally. For teachers, for students, for everybody who is keen on languages. Yeah, it's a cool place, just a great community. I agree. Okay, so, and also maybe I want to bring here the point that the best way to avoid mistakes non-native speakers do, it's to get more native English in your everyday life, to have more native English in your everyday life, to watch YouTube, to watch series, to read books, to listen to podcasts, because if you create this like English speaking space around you, you will have to study less things, because you will just get them unconsciously. Sometimes if you listen to podcasts and watch videos, some of the things that will really be like study. Okay, so I guess it's not like even studying, it's like you just dive into language, yeah, and it becomes like unconscious starting for you. Yeah,
Yeah, and it also helps with understanding certain cultural references, pop culture references,
yeah,
um, slang as well. So yeah, that's good advice. And I really like Shaheen's comment that he put in the chat here. You should be better than yesterday, and that's a good attitude to have. You know, like if you're making incremental gains, you know,
yeah,
um, over time it adds up. There's a saying in Malay, sedikit sedikit lama lama menjadi bukit, which translated into English means a little bit over a long time grows into a mountain. And if you take that attitude to any skill, language learning especially, you know, if you're making small incremental improvements, if you're improving and finding ways to get better, just incrementally better than yesterday, then you're on the right path, and you really have nothing to worry about.
yeah. I
So,
agree totally. Okay, so I really want to ask maybe for a piece of feedback in our chat from the audience that we have today. Like, was it interesting for you? Was maybe it, useful for you? If we mentioned with Karuna something interesting for you, you can send like just the smile or any emoji, or maybe you can write something for us. It will be really important to receive some feedback. I guess so, yeah.
or if you have any questions, I'd be
Yeah,
happy
yeah,
to.
questions, of course. There is a question about the title of the TED Talk video I mentioned. I think that I'll share it maybe in the Telegram chat. Yeah. Okay, we have like 100% interest in. That's amazing. Okay.
Cool.
We can wait for some time for questions. Oh, and speaking about multicultural communication, I can mention even one challenge that I had today. Uh, I'm I really hope that I will not sound rude now, because it's about the country. When I just met Karuna, I asked like, "Where are you from?" Yeah, the typical question, and he mentioned Kuala Lumpur. That's where I come. Can you please pronounce it one more time?
Well, so I'm right now sitting in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So
Uh-huh.
there you go.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, it's so like it sounds like a fantastic country, because in my head there arises the picture of the Charlie and the chocolate fabric of these magic people that is
Does that make me an Oompa Loompa?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so uh, and I was thinking like, will it be rude to make a joke in this way? And because as I mentioned, I have this direct type of communication, and I was just thinking, will it be rude to mention it? So can you can answer maybe this question for now, like, is it rude to
Is
joke?
it rude to say that it sounds like an exotic chocolate factory place?
Yeah,
No,
like make
not
a
at
joke
all.
where you live.
So Maria has a question. Remind me, please, the name of the language where sukha means to love. Well, it's more like to like, right? If
Yeah.
you like something, and that is Malay, and I believe it could be Indonesian as well. Indonesian and Malay are very similar, but in this particular example that I gave, it was Malay. And Susu says, how can we understand that the feedback wasn't just a polite reaction and it was for real? Well, I think you will understand if feedback is valid on an intrinsic level, because feedback that is just polite tends to not be very targeted, tends to not have very actionable uh, content in the feedback, right? Feedback like, oh, I love the work you did, great job. It, yeah, it's a good, boost to your ego, but it isn't super actionable, and it isn't very specific, right? If you want to give valuable, positive feedback, focus on the specifics. Like, oh, Alina, I think you did a fantastic job in this webinar because, I understand it's your first time working with a large audience and you're relatively
That's
new to English for IT, but you were able to handle the audience well. You were able to handle the flow of the webinar, and everything went, pretty spectacularly. See, that emphasizes specific, aspects of Alina handling the webinar, and is positive feedback without being very general and sounding insincere. Is that right,
yeah.
Alina? Did that sound
Thank you so
insincere?
much. Yeah, we can, I think, maybe handle the last question for today and then finish, like, because it's a really interesting one. What accent is worst to understand? What accent is worst to understand for you from non-native English speakers?
Um, it it really depends. If so, accents have different degrees of heaviness, right? And uh, if an accent is heavy, it's difficult. It's difficult regardless of what accent it is, right? So if you have a very heavy, Scottish accent,
Hmm.
it's difficult to understand. If you have a very heavy, Californian, Valley Girl accent, it can be difficult to understand. If you have a very heavy Indian accent, it can be difficult to understand. If the accent is just light, then it's okay, like it's
Yeah.
understandable.
It's really like this. And from maybe based on my experience and that my students mentioned that uh, for them, like Indian English accent is the most difficult to understand because the sounds are pretty different. Yeah. So, but anyway, as you mentioned, it all depends on the level of the accent you have. Yeah, like on the how strong it is. Yeah,
Yeah, and everyone has an accent. A
yeah,
lot of people
for sure.
believe that they don't have accents. Well, that's not true.
Yeah,
Everyone has an accent.
yeah, even in our native language.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Okay, so then thank you, our audience, for staying today with us. I think that for me, it's an incredible experience. It's really my first time to be as a speaker or something like this. And it's so cool to get your feedback and your questions. Thank you really for watching. And we hope that it was really interesting and useful for you. And thanks, Karuna, for this practical experience that he brought today to us.
Yeah, not at all. Very, very happy to see everyone and that I was able to bring some value to this conversation today. And thanks, Alina, for making it a very pleasant experience. Just feels like us having a chat. And
Yeah.
of course, thanks to everyone listening in. And I'm glad you got some value out of it. Oh, I see Marcio. Hey, Marcio. Good to see you. Glad you joined. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, and join our chats, English for IT chats in Telegram. We have here links, yeah, in comments. And happy birthday to English for IT.
There we go. Happy birthday.
Okay, so I think that we can finish at this point, yeah.
All right.